Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Russell Cade adjusted his tie for the fifth time, checked his watch, and took a deep breath before opening his truck door. The mountain air felt clean in his lungs, but did nothing to calm the unease in his gut. The Mountain Ridge Country Club loomed ahead, all pristine columns and manicured lawns. Not his world. Not by a long shot, though he'd polished his work boots to a military shine and bought a new suit navy blue. Nothing fancy, but the best he could afford. The tailor had assured him it looked good. Professional. Appropriate. Still, Russell felt like an imposter walking toward the rehearsal dinner for his only daughter's wedding. The valet approached with a practiced smile that faltered when he saw Russell's 15-year-old Ford pickup. "Sir, would you like to self-park instead? There's a lot around back." Russell handed him the keys. "It runs fine. Just needs a wash." The valet nodded, taking the keys with 2 fingers as if they might dirty his white gloves. Inside the lobby, Russell scanned the room for familiar faces. Lyle had promised to arrive early, but there was no sign of his old friend. Instead, Russell caught sight of his wife, Mara, holding court near the bar. 27 years of marriage, and she still took his breath away. Blonde hair, swept up elegantly. That blue dress probably cost more than his monthly truck payment. She was laughing, champagne flute in hand, surrounded by Logan's family old money, old connections. Russell approached slowly, hands in pockets. Mara spotted him, and her smile tightened. "Russell," she said, voice cool as mountain spring water. "You're here. Finally." "Traffic," he lied. Truth was, he'd been sitting in the parking lot for 20 minutes, working up the nerve. She looked him up and down. "I see you went with the blue suit. Didn't they have anything with pinstripes?" "Everyone's wearing pinstripes." She touched his lapel. "And polyester blend? Really, Russell?" He swallowed the retort rising in his throat. "Where's Juno?" "Mingling. Like you should be." Mara turned back to her conversation circle, effectively dismissing him. Russell wandered toward the bar, ordered a whiskey neat. From this vantage point, he spotted Juno across the room. His chest tightened at the sight of her as a little girl, all grown up, laughing with her head thrown back, just like she did when she was 6. Her dark hair, his hair, not Mara's blonde, cascaded down her back. She had his eyes, too, deep brown and expressive. Logan stood beside her, arm firmly around her waist. Tall, polished, with that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. Russell had met him a dozen times over their 2-year courtship, but still felt like he was meeting a stranger each time. Russell lifted his glass in their direction, hoping to catch Juno's eye. She didn't notice him. Instead, a photographer approached the couple, and suddenly there was a flurry of activity. Logan's parents stepping in, Mara rushing over, everyone posing for photos. Russell took a step forward, but Lyle appeared at his side, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Looking mighty uncomfortable there, Russ," Lyle said, his voice gruff but kind. 60 years old with calloused hands and a weathered face, Lyle's presence was immediately grounding. "Feel like I'm wearing someone else's skin," Russell muttered, taking another sip. "Nice monkey suit, though. You clean up almost as good as that 71 Barracuda we fixed up last summer." Lyle's laugh was rough from 40 years of cigarettes. "Almost," Russell agreed with a small smile. The photographer was moving the group around now. "Family photos," he called out. Russell straightened, putting down his drink. But as he approached, he noticed the configuration. Logan's parents, Mara, Juno, Logan. A perfect symmetry. No obvious place for him. "Dad!" Juno finally noticed him, her face lighting up. She broke from the group to give him a quick hug. "You made it. Wouldn't miss it, Junebug." The childhood nickname slipped out automatically. He saw Logan's slight grimace. "We're just doing some quick photos," Juno explained, already backing toward the group. "Everything's chaos right now. Can we catch up in a bit?" Russell nodded, stepping back. "Sure thing." The photographer arranged them again. "Parents of the bride and groom," he called. Mara moved into position. Russell stepped forward. "Oh, we have enough people in this shot," the photographer said. "Maybe wait for the next grouping?" The next grouping never included him. Russell watched as various combinations of people were photographed, the couple with Mara, with Logan's parents, with bridesmaids, with groomsmen. Callie Mae, Juno's best friend since childhood, approached him with a sympathetic smile. "Hey, Mr. Cade." "Callie." He nodded, grateful for the familiar face. "You look beautiful. Maid of honor suits you." "Thanks," she said, glancing toward the photo session. "This whole thing is very elaborate, isn't it?" "Certainly is." He cleared his throat. "Juno seems happy, though. That's what matters." Callie's expression flickered with something concerned. "Pity?" "Sure," she said, but didn't sound convinced. The dinner itself wasn't much better. Russell found himself seated at a table far from the head table where Juno, Logan, Mara, and Logan's parents sat. Instead, he was surrounded by distant relatives of the Thorns who spoke about vacation homes and stock portfolios. After dinner, he tried again to find a moment with Juno. He caught her by the dessert table, loading a plate with chocolate-covered strawberries. "Still got your sweet tooth," he observed. She smiled, genuinely this time. "Some things never change." "Listen, Junebug, I just wanted to—" "Juno," Logan's voice cut through. "My parents are leaving. Come say goodbye." His tone left no room for discussion. Juno looked torn for a moment. "Sorry, Dad. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? We'll talk then." But Russell knew they wouldn't. As he watched her walk away, a memory surfaced so vividly it felt like being dunked in cold water. 15 years earlier, Russell sat on the edge of Juno's bed, stroking her hair as she finally fell asleep. The nightmares had been worse since Mara left 3 months ago. Postpartum depression, the doctors called it. All Russell knew was that his wife was gone, and his 11-year-old daughter cried herself to sleep most nights. "She'll come back, right, Daddy?" Juno had asked earlier, her voice small. "Course she will, Junebug. Your mom just needs some time to feel better." He tried to sound confident. The truth was, he had no idea if Mara would return. Their marriage had been rocky for years, her from old Southern money, him from nothing but foster homes and determination. He'd never been good enough for her family, and lately, it seemed he wasn't good enough for her either. But he'd be damned if he wasn't good enough for Juno. Russell glanced at his watch. Almost midnight. He had to be up at 5 for his construction job, and then he'd work his second job at the auto shop from 4 to 8. But before that, he had to finish sewing Juno's Halloween costume, a superhero outfit she designed herself. He'd never sewn anything before Mara left. Now he could stitch a fairly straight line, cook a decent meal, and braid hair with daddy fingers that were too big for the delicate work, but tried anyway to make a T-school pickup the next day. Juno ran to him, waving a paper. "I got an A on my science project, the one you helped me with." Russell scooped her up, swinging her onto his shoulders. "That's my girl. Smart as a whip, just like your old man." "You're not old," she giggled, her small hands gripping his. "Not while I've got you to keep me young," he said. From her perch on his shoulders, she leaned down to see his face. "You're my hero, Dad. The best one ever." Russell blinked hard, his throat tight with emotion. "And don't you forget it, Junebug." Back in the present, Russell watched as Logan kissed Juno's cheek, his hand possessively on the small of her back. The rehearsal dinner was winding down. He hadn't spoken more than 20 words to his daughter all evening. Mara approached, champagne flute still in hand. "Leaving already?" she asked, noticing him gathering his coat. "Not much reason to stay," he said. She sighed. "You could try harder, you know. Mingle. Network. These are important people." "Important to whom?" "To me. To Juno's future. To the family we're joining." She lowered her voice. "Your clothes, your accent, the way you stand there looking like you'd rather be changing oil, it embarrasses me, Russell." The words hit like a physical blow, but years of practice kept his face neutral. "Good night, Mara." As he walked out, he passed Logan's father in conversation with another guest. Complete renovation of the mountain house. Cost a fortune, but worth every penny. You can't put a price on quality. Russell almost laughed. He'd spent his life putting a price on quality, calculating exactly how many hours he needed to work to afford Juno's college fund, Mara's designer tastes, the house they'd built that was never quite good enough. The valet brought his truck around. As Russell climbed in, he caught a glimpse of himself in the rearview mirror, gray at his temples, lines etched deeply around his eyes. 52 years old, and what did he have to show for it? A daughter who barely had time for him, a wife who was ashamed of him, In a lifetime of building things for other people, he started the engine, the familiar rumble more comforting than anything he'd felt all night. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cool. Russell had barely slept. He sat at his workbench before sunrise, putting the finishing touches on Juno's gift, a small wooden music box he'd carved himself. He'd spent months on it, working on the delicate hinges, the inlaid pattern on the lid, the tiny gears that would play "You Are My Sunshine" when opened the song he used to sing to her every night. Inside the box, he placed a letter he'd written and rewritten a dozen times. It had taken him hours to find the right words. Russell had always been better with his hands than with language. But he needed Juno to know how proud he was, how much he loved her, how he would always be there for her no matter what. He wrapped the box in simple white paper, tied it with a blue ribbon that matched her eyes. Then he showered, shaved, and put on his suit, the same one from the rehearsal dinner, despite Mara's comments. It was the only one he owned. Russell arrived at the Thornawood Estate, Logan's family property, 2 hours before the ceremony was set to begin. The massive house was bustling with activity, florists arranging elaborate displays, caterers setting up, staff moving chairs and tables. He carried the gift, looking for Juno or somewhere appropriate to leave it. Instead, he found Mara in the main hall, directing a young man hanging a floral arrangement. "Higher on the left," she instructed. "It needs to be perfect." "Morning," Russell said. Mara turned, her expression tightening. "You're early. Thought I might see Juno before things get started. She's getting her hair done." No interruptions. Mara noticed the package in his hands. "What's that?" "Just a small gift for Juno." Mara held out her hand. "I'll take it to her later. She's too busy right now." Russell hesitated, but handed it over. "Make sure she opens it before the ceremony. It's important." "Of course," Mara said, her smile not reaching her eyes. As Russell turned away, she slipped the package into a drawer of a nearby antique console, locking it with a small key. Outside, Russell wandered the grounds, taking in the elaborate setup. White chairs arranged in perfect rows facing an arch twined with roses. A string quartet setting up near a small reflecting pool. Crystal glasses catching the morning light on tables covered in silk. "Mr. K," a young man in a server's uniform approached. "The ceremony will be starting in about an hour. I can show you to your seat." "That's fine. I know where the family is supposed to sit," Russell replied. "Front row, right side." The server looked uncomfortable. "Actually, sir, I have specific instructions about your seating." Russell frowned but followed the young man, who led him not to the seating area by the arch, but around the side of the house, past the kitchen entrance, to a service area near the back. There, beside 2 large waste bins, sat a single plastic folding chair. "There must be a mistake," Russell said. The server swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, sir. I double-checked. These are the instructions I was given." Russell stared at the chair. No shade, no view of the ceremony, just a plastic seat next to the trash. "Who gave you these instructions?" he asked quietly. "I'm not at liberty to say, sir." The young man couldn't meet his eyes. Russell nodded slowly. He knew exactly who was behind this. And WHY.AS if on cue. The click of heels sounded on the stone path. Mara appeared, elegant in her mother-of-the-bride dress, pale blue, perfectly tailored. "Problem?" she asked, her voice sweet with fake concern. "My seat is by the trash cans," Russell said flatly. Mara shrugged delicately. "Seating was tight. We had to prioritize." Russell looked at her. 27 years of marriage, and in that moment he felt like he was seeing her for the first time. The carefully constructed facade, the cold calculation behind her eyes. "I see," he said quietly. She smiled, victorious. "Guess you don't count." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and your little gift? I'll make sure it gets lost in the shuffle. We wouldn't want to embarrass Juno with something homemade." Russell stood very still as she walked away. Something cold and hard settled in his chest, not quite anger, not quite grief. Something final. He turned to the server, who looked mortified. "It's not your fault, son." Russell walked back to the house, to the drawer where he'd seen Mara place his gift. Locked. He reached into his pocket for his wallet, pulled out a credit card, and jimmied the lock with practiced ease, a skill learned in his younger days when locked doors meant no shelter for the night. the gift was there. He took it, tucked it under his arm, and walked to his truck without looking back in tears. No yelling, just the quiet, certain knowledge that something had ended and something else was about to begin. Do you, Juniper Elise Cade, take Logan Alexander Thorne to be your lawfully wedded husband? The officiant's voice carried across the Thornwood estate grounds, where 200 guests sat in white chairs facing the floral arch. Juno, resplendent in her designer gown, hesitated. Her eyes scanned the front row, where her mother sat beside Logan's parents. The empty space beside Mara seemed to grow larger by the second. Juno, the officiant prompted. Callie, standing behind her friend in her maid of honor dress, leaned forward. "Where's your dad?" she whispered. Juno's face drained of color. "I don't know," she murmured. She looked to her mother, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head, but a murmur rippled through the guests. Logan squeezed Juno's hand, his smile becoming fixed. "Juno, for God's sake," he whispered through clenched teeth. Callie stepped closer to Juno. "He wouldn't just leave," she said, loud enough for the first few rows to hear. "Not without a reason." Juno's bouquet slipped from her fingers, white roses scattering across the grass. Miles away, Russell pulled his truck into the familiar gravel lot of Gibbons' auto shop. The closed sign hung in the window, but he knew Lyle would be inside Sunday, was when he did the books and handled the week's paperwork. Russell didn't knock. After 20 years of friendship, he didn't need to. He found Lyle at his cluttered desk, glasses perched on his nose, squinting at invoices. "Thought you'd be playing father of the bride right about now," Lyle said without looking up. Then he noticed Russell's face and set down his pen. "What happened?" Russell didn't answer. He walked straight to the back of the shop, to the half-finished project they'd been working on between paying jobs. A 1971 Plymouth Barracuda, once a rusted shell, now slowly coming back to life under their patient hands. He shrugged off his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and reached for a wrench. "Russ," Lyle said, following him. "Talk to me." Russell tightened a bolt with precise, controlled force. "Nothing to say." Lyle watched as Russell methodically moved around the car, checking connections, adjusting parts, his movements deliberate and focused. "What did they do to you?" Lyle asked quietly. Russell paused, knuckles white around the wrench. "Put my seat by the trash cans. Told me I don't count." His voice was even, betraying no emotion. "Mara's words, not mine." Lyle swore under his breath. "Jesus, Russ. Got me thinking," Russell continued, moving to the engine compartment. "All these years, fixing everything for everyone else. Homes, cars." He glanced up at Lyle. "Marriages, and now I'm fixing me." Russell's eyes held a look Lyle had never seen before, something cold and resolute. "And breaking everything else." The wedding reception carried on despite the palpable tension. Guests pretended not to notice that the father of the bride was missing, that the bride herself seemed distracted and pale, that the mother of the bride was drinking champagne at an alarming rate. Juno cornered her mother by the bar. "Where's he, Mom?" "How should I know?" Mara replied, signaling the bartender for another glass. "You know your father. Probably couldn't handle the pressure of civilized company." "That's not like him at all," Juno argued. "Dad wouldn't just leave. Not on my wedding day." "Well, he did," Mara snapped. "And honestly, it's for the best. He would have embarrassed us all." Callie approached, her expression grim. "Mrs. Cade, may I have a word with Juno?" "Alone." Mara rolled her eyes, but moved away, immediately engaging with a group of Logan's relatives as if nothing were wrong. "What is it?" Juno asked as soon as they were alone. Callie pulled her into a quiet corner. "I overheard one of the servers talking. Your dad was here early this morning. They gave him a seat." She hesitated. "Where, Callie?" "Where did they seat my father?" "By the trash cans, Juno. Behind the kitchen. Out of sight." Juno stared at her friend in disbelief. "That can't be right. There must be some mistake." "No mistake." Callie's voice hardened. "And that's not all. I saw your mother take something from him, a gift, I think. She locked it away in that antique cabinet in the foyer." Juno's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. I've been watching your mom for years, Juno. The way she treats your dad, the things she says when she thinks no one's listening. This isn't new." "No," Juno admitted quietly. It's not. Logan appeared at her side, his arms circling her waist possessively. There you are. My parents are asking when we're cutting the cake. In a minute, Juno said, her mind racing. Now please. Logan's pleasant smile didn't match his tone. We have a schedule to keep. As Juno allowed herself to be led away, Callie caught her arm. Check the cabinet, she whispered, before you leave for your honeymoon. The next morning, Russell sat in his lawyer's office, a stack of documents before him. Are you absolutely certain about this, Russell? Attorney James Davis had handled Russell's legal affairs for decades. These actions will have significant consequences. I'm aware, Russell replied, signing his name with a steady hand. Selling your shares in Cade Construction to their direct competitor is going to devastate the company. Your wife's family. Ex-wife, Russell corrected. Soon enough. Even so, this is quite drastic. Russell looked up, his expression unwavering. 20 years ago, I built that company from nothing. Borrowed against everything I owned. Worked 18-hour days. Made it profitable. Then Mara's family swooped in during the recession, bought a controlling interest while I was desperate, and pushed me into a corner office where I could fix problems but not make decisions. He signed another document. Now I'm unfixing their problems. The lawyer side. And the college fund? The investments? The house. The college fund transfers to my name only. Juno can still access it if she needs it, but Mara can't touch it. The investments, I'm liquidating my half, anyway. And the house. Russell paused. I built that house with my own 2 hands. Every nail, every board. And I'm walking away from it. Davis studied his client carefully. This isn't just about the wedding, is it? The wedding was just the last nail in the coffin. This has been coming for years. Russell finished signing the last document. I'm done being the inconvenient husband, the embarrassing father, the employee instead of the owner. I'm done fixing what they break. As Russell stood to leave, Davis asked, what will you do now? For the first time, a slight smile touched Russell's lips. Whatever I want. 1 week after the wedding, Juno sat in her new husband's penthouse apartment, staring at her phone. She called her father 17 times. No answer. Texted him dozens of messages. No response. The honeymoon had been a disaster. After finding the locked cabinet empty, she confronted her mother just before leaving for the airport. Mara had dismissed her concerns, blamed her father, claimed he was jealous of her happiness. But sitting on a beach in Bali, Juno couldn't shake the image Callie had planted in her mind, her father, alone beside trash cans, understanding exactly what her mother thought of him. Still obsessing? Logan asked, coming into the room with a drink in hand. He'll get over it. You don't know my dad, Juno said quietly. I know his type, Logan scoffed. Blue-collar guy with a chip on his shoulder about people who have more than he does. Trust me, once he cools down, he'll be back asking for something. Juno stared at her husband. Is that what you think of him? It's what everyone thinks, babe. Logan sank into a leather armchair. Your mom's been managing his rough edges for years. Why do you think she kept him away from most of the wedding planning? From my parents. Because she's ashamed of him. Juno whispered, the realization hitting her fully. Logan shrugged. He doesn't exactly fit in with our crowd. Nothing wrong with that. It's just reality. Juno's phone rang not her father, but Callie. She answered immediately. Have you seen it? Callie asked without preamble. Seen what? Check your email. Now. Juno opened her laptop and found Callie's message. Attached was a video file labeled June 15th service entrance. What is this? Juno asked, clicking play. The video showed security footage from the wedding venue, the service area behind the kitchen. The timestamp showed 9:17 a.m., nearly 2 hours before the ceremony. There was her father, being led by a server to a single chair placed next to 2 large waste bins. The confusion on his face was clear even in the grainy footage. Then her mother appeared, saying something the camera didn't catch. Her father's posture changed, stiffened. Then he walked away. Where did you get this? Juno asked, her voice shaking. One of the servers sent it to me. They felt terrible about what happened. Juno, it's spreading online. People are talking. Juno closed the laptop, feeling sick. I have to find him. Find who? Logan asked from his chair. My dad. I need to explain. To apologize. Logan set down his drink with deliberate care. No, you don't. Your father made his choice. He walked out on your wedding. If anything, he should be apologizing to you. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Logan's voice hardened. You married me, Juno. You chose my world. My family. This is where you belong now. Juno looked at her husband of 1 week and suddenly saw him clearly, the same contempt in his eyes that she'd seen her mother's, the same dismissal of her father and everything he represented. I need some air, she said, grabbing her coat. Juno, Logan's voice was a warning. Don't make this into something it's not. But as she closed the door behind her, Juno knew it was already something much bigger than she'd realized. 3 weeks after the wedding, Mara Cade sat in her financial advisor's office, staring in disbelief at the statements before her. This can't be right, she said. Harold Barnes, who had managed the Cade finances for 15 years, looked genuinely apologetic. I'm afraid it is, Mrs. Cade. Russell sold his shares in Cade Construction to Riverview Builders last week. The sale went through yesterday. Without consulting me? Without my signature? How is that possible? The shares were in his name only. Always have been. Barnes shuffled uncomfortably. And there's more. He's liquidated his portion of your joint investments, withdrawn his contribution to the property fund, and he hesitated. And what, Harold? And he's filed for divorce. The papers should have been delivered this morning. As if on cue, Mara's phone buzzed. A text from her housekeeper. A man came with papers. I signed for them. They're on your desk. Mara's perfectly manicured nails dug into the arms of her chair. This is ridiculous. He wouldn't. He did, Barnes said softly. And Mrs. Cade, I have to tell you, financially speaking, this puts you in a difficult position. The lifestyle you're accustomed to, the house. The house is in both our names, Mara interrupted. Yes, but the mortgage payments. What about them? Barnes looked pained. They come from Russell's personal account, not the joint account. Always have. Mara felt the blood drain from her face. All these years, she thought they were barely keeping up with her lifestyle because Russell wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't clever enough with money. In reality, he'd been carrying far more of the financial burden than she'd realized. What do I do now? She asked, her voice small. Barnes sighed. I suggest you find a good divorce attorney, and perhaps consider downsizing. The Mountain Ridge Bar was not the sort of establishment Walton Cade usually frequented. Too clean, too expensive, too many rules. But his brother had insisted on meeting here, and after 20 years of estrangement, Walton wasn't about to argue. He spotted Russell immediately sitting in a corner booth, back to the wall, nursing what looked like club soda. Some things never changed. Russell had always been the cautious one, the responsible one. Little brother, Walton said, sliding into the booth. Looking prosperous. Russell nodded once, his expression unreadable. Walton. A waitress appeared. Walton ordered whiskey, straight up. When she left, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. So, Walton finally said, 20 years is a long time. Yes. You gonna make me drag it out of you? Why call me now, after all this time? Russell studied his brother 56, but looking closer to 70. Years of hard drinking and harder living had taken their toll. They shared the same dark eyes, the same square jaw, but there the resemblance ended. Where Russell was solid, Walton was hollowed out. I need information, Russell said simply. Walton laughed, a harsh sound. That's rich. The great Russell Cade needs something from his screw-up brother? Must be desperate times. They are. Russell leaned forward. I need to know about you and Mara. Walton's laugh died abruptly. What about us? I know there was something between you. Before I married her. I want to know if there was anything after. The waitress returned with Walton's drink. He downed half of it in one swallow, then set the glass down with a shaking hand. Why ask questions when you don't want the answers? He said. I want this answer. Walton sighed, suddenly looking very tired. Yes, there was something after. About 20 years ago, when things were bad between you two. She came to me. Russell's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. How long? 6 months, give or take. Then she went back to you. Did you use protection? Walton stared at his brother, realization dawning. Jesus, Russ. You think. Answer the question. No, not always. Walton's voice dropped. You think Juno might be. Mine or yours? That's the question. Russell pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, slid it across the table. I need a DNA sample. Hair will do. Walton's hand shook as he reached for the envelope. And if she's mine? She's still mine, Russell said, his voice firm despite the pain evident in his eyes. I raised her. I loved her. I'm her father in every way that matters. He stood, placing money on the table for the drinks. But I needed to know how deep the lies went. Russ, Walton called as his brother walked away. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I was messed up back then. Jealous. You had everything I wanted. Russell paused, looking back with an expression of genuine pity. No, Walt. I just thought I did. The results came back a week later. Russell sat in his truck, staring at the envelope for a long time before opening it. The medical language was clinical, precise. The conclusion, unavoidable. Juno was not his biological daughter. He folded the paper carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and sat very still, letting the implications wash over him. 26 years of loving a child he thought was his. 26 years of being the only real father she'd ever known. None of that had changed. What had changed was his understanding of the woman he'd married. The depth of her deception. The calculated way she must have returned to him, carrying another man's child, allowing him to believe it was his. Russell started the truck, drove to the small apartment he'd rented after leaving the house. He pulled out his phone, typed a text message to Juno. The truth will come out soon enough. But know this, you're still mine. You've always been mine. But now I owe no one nothing. He looked at the words for a long moment, then deleted them without sending. Some truths were too heavy to share, some wounds too deep to expose. Instead, he texted Lyle. Found a property up near Black Mountain. Good space for a shop. Let's talk. It was time to build something new. The video of Russell's seat by the trash went viral in Asheville social circles, a small ripple in a small pond, but devastating in their world. Whispers followed Mara at charity events. Invitations became scarce. Logan's family, obsessed with appearances and reputation, distanced themselves. It's humiliating, Logan complained to Juno over dinner. My father had to explain to the board why his daughter-in-law's family was creating bad press. It affects business, Juno. Juno pushed her food around her plate. I still haven't been able to reach my dad. For God's sake, forget about your father. Logan snapped. We have real problems. My promotion is on the line because of this mess. Juno looked up, suddenly seeing the familiar pattern, her needs dismissed, her feelings secondary. Just like with her mother. Just like her father had endured for years. I'm going to find him, she said quietly. With or without your support. Logan's face darkened. If you walk out that door to chase after him, don't bother coming back. Juno stood, her decision made. I'll pack a bag. 6 months after the wedding, Russell stood on the deck of his newly built cabin, watching the sun rise over the Blue Ridge Mountains. The morning air was sharp with the scent of pine and wood smoke. Below, nestled into the hillside, sat Black Mountain Custom Automotive, the shop he and Lyle had opened with the money from Russell's liquidated investments. The cabin itself was modest but solid, built with his own hands, designed for one person with no compromises, no considerations for anyone else's taste or needs. For the first time in decades, Russell lived in a space that was entirely his own. His phone buzzed. A text from Lyle. Kid's here again. Third time this week. Russell sighed. The kid was Tyler Matthews, 16 years old, recently placed in his 5th foster home in 3 years. Angry, defensive, mechanically gifted, he'd started hanging around the shop after school, watching them work, sometimes helping when allowed. Russell recognized himself in the boy, the wariness, the hunger to learn, the need to create something lasting in a world that felt temporary. Give him the intake paperwork for the Jensen job, Russell texted back. And put him on the clock this time. Inside, Russell made coffee, his movements unhurried. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago. He'd given Mara the house, but without his income, she couldn't afford to keep it. Last he heard, she'd sold it for far less than it was worth and moved into a condo. Juno had reached out dozens of times. Calls, texts, even a letter delivered to the shop. Russell hadn't responded. The pain was still too raw, the betrayal too complete. Not just Mara's lies, but Juno's complicity in his humiliation at the wedding. She might not have known about the seat by the trash, but she'd known how her mother treated him for years. And she'd said nothing, done nothing. As Russell drove down the winding mountain road to the shop, his mind drifted to the early days of his marriage. He'd loved Mara with a fierce intensity that bordered on worship. The beautiful, sophisticated daughter of a prominent Asheville family. She'd chosen him, a rough-edged foster kid with nothing but ambition and work-calloused hands. He'd spent decades trying to be worthy of that choice, never realizing she'd made it for all the wrong reasons. The shop came into view, a large metal building with a gravel parking lot, already filled with cars waiting for repair. Lyle's truck was parked near the entrance, and beside it, a battered bicycle that must belong to Tyler. Inside, the familiar sounds of metal on metal. Engines turning over, compressed air hissing through tools filled the space. It smelled of oil and metal and honest work. Russell felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Lyle approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "Morning, boss." "Not your boss," Russell reminded him. Equal partners was the only arrangement he'd accept now. "Got the Matthews kid working on an oil change. Boy's got good hands." Russell nodded. "His caseworker call you back?" "Yeah. Says he's on his third strike at the current placement. One more screw up, and he's headed to a group home until he ages out." The words hit Russell hard. He remembered the group homes. The impersonal care, the survival mentality, the way kids aged out with no support and no future. "What kind of screw up?" he asked. "Staying out past curfew. Working on a neighbor's motorcycle without permission. Using tools from his foster father's garage without asking." Lyle shrugged. "Kid stuff, but the family's got younger children. They're nervous about his influence." Russell watched Tyler across the shop, head bent over an engine, completely absorbed in the work. His dark hair fell into his eyes, but his hands moved with confidence and precision. "What if we offered him an apprenticeship?" Russell said suddenly. "Official program. Part-time after school, full-time in summer. Stipend. Structure." Lyle raised an eyebrow. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" "Maybe." Russell had been considering getting certified as a foster parent. Not just for Tyler, but for others like him. Kids who needed skills, purpose, a path forward. "This place has plenty of room to grow. Could use more good hands." A slow smile spread across Lyle's weathered face. "Fixing cars and fixing kids. Sound about right for you." "Better than fixing marriages," Russell muttered. The front door chimed. Russell turned, expecting a customer, and found himself face to face with Juno. She looked different, thinner, less polished. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup. She wore jeans and a plain sweater instead of the designer clothes he was used to seeing her in. "Dad," she said, her voice small and uncertain. Russell felt a wave of emotions: love, pain, anger, longing, all crowding his chest at once. He nodded once, not trusting himself to speak. Lyle looked between them. "I'll, go check on the kid," he said, backing away. "Can we talk?" Juno asked when they were alone. "Please." Russell led her to his small office at the back of the shop. No decorations on the walls yet, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet. He gestured for her to sit, then took his place behind the desk. "You look well," she said, though her eyes said otherwise. "You don't," he replied honestly. Juno gave a small, sad laugh. "Yeah, well, divorce will do that to you." Russell's eyebrows rose. Didn't last long. 6 weeks after the honeymoon. She twisted her hands in her lap. "Turns out, when your new husband cares more about appearances than people, it doesn't make for a great marriage." "I'm sorry," Russell said, and meant it. Whatever his feelings about Logan, he never wanted Juno to be hurt. "I went looking for you," she continued, "after I saw the video, after I understood what Mom did." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why didn't you tell me? All those years, the way she treated you, why didn't you say something?" "What would have been the point?" Russell asked quietly. "You were her daughter. I didn't want to put you in the middle. I was your daughter too." Juno's voice broke. "I am your daughter." Russell's expression hardened. "You knew. Maybe not about the seat by the trash, but you knew how she spoke to me. How she looked down on me. And you did nothing." The accusation hung in the air between them. Juno didn't deny it. I was wrong, she whispered. So wrong. I thought that's just how marriage was compromise, putting up with things. I never realized how one-sided it all was until... She stopped, swallowing hard. Until I found myself in the same position with Logan. Russell felt a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart, but he wasn't ready to let it crumble. Not yet. What do you want from me, Juno? A chance, she said simply. A chance to make it right. To be in your life again. It's not that simple. I know. She reached into her bag, pulled out a familiar object, the music box he'd carved for her wedding gift. Callie helped me find this. Mom had hidden it away. Russell stared at the box, remembering the hours of work, the love he'd poured into it. I read your letter, Juno continued, about how proud you were of me, how you'd always be there. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. But I wasn't there for you. No, Russell agreed. You weren't. Will you ever forgive me? Russell looked at his daughter, this young woman he'd raised, loved, taught to ride a bike and change a tire and face the world without fear. Not his blood, but as in every way that mattered. I don't know, he said honestly. I need time. Juno nodded, accepting his answer. She set the music box on his desk, stood to leave. I'm staying at Callie's for now, if you ever want to reach me. As she turned to go, Russell said, You knew, and you did nothing. Juno paused at the door, her shoulders slumping. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. After she left, Russell sat for a long time, staring at the music box. Finally, he opened it, listened to the tinkling notes of You Are My Sunshine, the song he'd sung to her every night. The song that had once meant everything. That he closed the lid, put the box in his desk drawer, and went back to work. There were cars to fix, a business to build, a life to reconstruct. Forgiveness would have to wait. 1 year after the wedding that had changed everything, Russell stood at a podium in the Asheville Community Center, looking out at a crowd of faces, some familiar, some new. Behind him, a banner read Black Mountain Youth Mechanics Program. First graduation. Most of you know me as a guy who fixes things, he began. Cars mostly, sometimes houses. But this program isn't just about fixing engines or changing oil. It's about fixing futures. In the front row sat 5 teenagers, including Tyler Matthews, each wearing a navy blue work shirt with a Black Mountain Automotive logo embroidered on the pocket. They completed the first 6-month course learning basic mechanical skills, earning certifications, gaining confidence along with knowledge. These young people have shown up every day, put in the work, learned skills that will last a lifetime, Russell continued. Some of them came from tough situations, foster care, troubled homes, difficult circumstances. But they all have one thing in common. They refuse to be defined by what happened to them. They chose to define themselves by what they could build. In the back of the room, Russell spotted Mara, sitting alone. She'd lost weight, her designer clothes replaced by simpler attire. The gossip in town said she'd been forced to take a job at her family's company, a clerical position, nothing prestigious. The fall from social grace had been swift and merciless. Their eyes met briefly across the room. Russell felt no satisfaction at her diminished circumstances, no joy in her downfall. Just a dull acknowledgement that justice sometimes arrived on its own schedule. Sometimes you gotta be thrown out with the trash to realize your value, Russell said, returning his attention to the graduates. But I promise you can always climb out and build something better. The applause was thunderous. The 5 graduates stood, receiving certificates and handshakes. Tyler, no longer the angry boy who'd first appeared at the shop, grinned with genuine pride. After the ceremony, Russell mingled with parents, community leaders, and supporters of the program. The mayor mentioned expanding it to other communities. A state representative discussed potential funding. What had begun as one man's personal reinvention was growing into something much larger. As the crowd thinned, Russell noticed a figure lingering near the exit. Juno, wearing a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different from when he'd last seen her 6 months ago, healthier, more centered, and visibly pregnant. Their eyes met across the room. She didn't approach, didn't try to speak to him, just watched with a mixture of pride and sadness as he accepted congratulations, as he moved comfortably through a world he'd built without her. Russell nodded once in her direction. Not forgiveness, not yet. but acknowledgement, recognition of her presence. It was something. After everyone had gone, Russell returned to his cabin. The solitude that had once felt liberating now occasionally felt hollow. He'd built a new life, a good life, a life that helped others while protecting himself. But the walls he'd constructed to keep out pain also kept out connection. As he climbed the steps to his porch, he noticed something placed carefully beside his door, the wooden music box he'd carved for Juno, now showing signs of careful restoration. The hinges had been oiled, the wood polished. A note sat beside it. "You taught me how to fix things. I'm still learning." Russell picked up the box, running his fingers over the familiar grain of the wood. He opened the lid, listened to the melody, slightly off-key now, but recognizable. "You are my sunshine." The song of his fatherhood. He set the box on his kitchen table, staring at it in the fading light. Then he closed the lid, shutting off the music mid-note. Not yet, but maybe someday.